Hello there and welcome to my review of Halloween H20. That's Halloween 20 years later, because this is set 20 years after the first two movies. We've got Jamie Lee Curtis back as Laurie Strode, although she's changed her name here. She's gone into hiding after the events of those first two films to escape the clutches of her brother. She doesn't want to be found by him, so she's gone into seclusion as the headmaster of a private school. Myers resurfaces once more, obviously, and goes on the hunt for his sister. Only this time, Laurie Strode is ready for him, and she faces him and confronts the demons of her past. This film is really short. It's like the shortest entry in the series. It barely touches 80 minutes. In fact, it's well before 80 minutes that the credits start to roll. So it breezes by pretty quickly. There doesn't seem to be a right lot of narrative in it. It's just this setup and then this big conclusion, really. But you know what? I actually kind of like it. I like it a lot, actually. This is very much heavily influenced by Scream. Obviously, Scream came out in '96, I believe it was, and really influenced this new kind of slew of slashers. The slasher film, the horror genre itself was dead before Scream kind of revitalized it. And in that film, Halloween was a very big presence. It kind of influenced that movie in a great deal. And we even got to see some footage of the Halloween film being played in Scream. Well, here, there's a moment where we get a bit of Scream being played in this film. So it gets very meta by that point. But suffice to say, Scream is a big influence on this. Now that obviously has to be one of the reasons that Kevin Williamson, who wrote Scream, is brought on here as an executive producer. And I can't help but feel his touch at certain places during the film. One scene in particular is the opening sequence in which Myers breaks into this nurse's house in order to steal the records of Laurie Strode to find her whereabouts. But I think that sequence is handled really well by director Steve Miner, who previously worked on Friday the 13th Parts 2 and 3. Don't hold that against him. That very low budget movies. I think he did the best he could given what he had. But he's done a couple of guilty pleasures of mine. Forever Young starring Mel Gibson and Lake Placid, which I think are pretty decent films. Okay, this guy isn't Spielberg, but he's a competent director. But anyway, that opening sequence, like I said, I feel Williamson's fingerprints all over it, because we have this moment in which Myers is attacking the nurse in her home, and just outside the window we can see the police. So she's literally within a hair's breadth of shouting these guys, of getting to these guys, of getting help. Not quite sure how much help they would really be against Michael Myers, but she's there anyway. And I think that really builds the tension. When you can see a victim's salvation just within their grasp and they just can't quite get there, I think that really adds to the tension. It worked with Drew Barrymore's character in that opening scene in Scream, when she can literally see her parents going into the house, but she just can't get there. And that scene was so tense the first time I watched it because of that. And that technique is used multiple times during this film. Like there's one instance when Josh Hartnett's character and Michelle Williams' character are at this door. So, their salvation lies just beyond that door, getting through that door. And just like literally a few feet away from them is this metal gate in which Myers is trying to stab his knife through. So, like, they're in danger and they can almost grasp salvation. I think that is a really great way of building tension in these kind of movies. Now, there are two main downsides to this film, two main critiques, I guess, that I have of it. One is that there are too many jump scares, and that comes from the fact that Myers isn't really given that much to do until the final act. He has this big opening act in which he kills a few people, but from then on, he's pretty quiet. So they have to kind of fill in some scares in between, and they do it through jump scares, something I've never really been that big of a fan of. The other main criticism is really that there's just too much referencing going on in this film. Like at one point we have Janet Leigh, which is Jamie Lee Curtis's mother. Obviously she's famous for being the original Scream Queen from Psycho, and you know, she's here as a character that I think was called Norma. I'm sure I hear her being called Norma, which obviously is a reference to Norma Bates, but we also see the car that she drove in Psycho, and we even get the music, a little hint of that Psycho music playing as she walks to the car. It's so on the nose, really heavy-handed, and it feels like referencing for referencing's sake, because if you take this character out, it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference to the film. There are a few other things, like, you know, I don't particularly like the design of Michael Myers' mask in this. I feel like it's too plain, it's too white, there's not enough shading on it, and also there's a couple of scenes, like a classroom scene in which they're discussing Frankenstein and how he has to confront his monster, which of course is the theme of this film. That's what this film is about. You know, this is essentially Laurie Strode having to confront her demons, have to face up to it, and yeah, they use the example of Frankenstein, and it's very heavy-handed. Other than that, everything else in this film I do find really enjoyable. There's some genuine tense moments, some of which I've already just described. We get this kind of look at Laurie's psychology. I like the fact that they show you how scarred this woman is on a psychological level, because let's face it, she went through some stuff in those first two movies. That'd be enough to scar anyone. And, you know, she sees the ghost of Michael Myers everywhere in reflections and whatnot, which makes for a pretty good scene in which she actually sees Michael Myers. She doesn't realise it, she thinks it's a vision again, and that makes for a pretty cool moment, I think. The film also introduces us to Josh Hartnett, who I actually quite like as an actor. Okay, he's not going to be winning any Oscars anytime soon, but he's a likeable presence, I feel. And obviously Michelle Williams is great as well. You know, she did a couple of film roles before this, but yeah, it's nice to see her here in a slasher film role. LL Cool J's in this, and okay, his character seems a little bit kind of heavy-handed in the writing department, but I think LL Cool J as an actor, as a personality, brings enough to it to make me like this guy. Certainly a heck of a lot more than a certain other rapper kind of singer that we will be seeing in a future film. But yeah, definitely here, he's a likeable presence. Jamie Lee Curtis is really good in this film. I'm glad well, I know we couldn't have had Donald Pleasence, but I'm glad that they accepted that. They accepted that they didn't need him, that this is her story. We get a little nod to him at the beginning, but quite frankly, I didn't need to hear his shtick anymore, to be honest. I got a little bit tired of hearing his speeches about evil and the face of evil and the evil that's behind those eyes. And yeah, you know, 6 films or 5 films, obviously, if you don't count Halloween 3. Yeah, I was tired of it. Let's make this Laurie Strode story. I'm glad they went with that, and I like what they do with it. You know, they don't overstay their welcome. They know exactly what they're doing. They just it's this simple tale about her facing her demons, and when she does, that moment in which she decides to stay and face Michael Myers, it's a really kick-ass moment, and yeah, it really makes me root for Jamie Lee Curtis, for Laurie Strode. The film maybe hangs on one too many coincidences for my liking, such as the fact that Laurie tells her boyfriend, so to speak, about her history literally 5 minutes before Michael Myers actually shows up. It's all very coincidental, but hey ho, it works on a dramatic level, you know, for the way they wish to build tension and whatnot, and get the ball rolling. It works if you kind of switch your brain off a little bit. But hey, you know what? We've been asked to buy so much more in the previous outing, so if we can't buy that here, then there's something wrong, really. But yeah, there you go. I mean, I like this film. I think it's quite a guilty pleasure. It's very entertaining, and it's really good to have Jamie Lee Curtis back in the role. I just wish they'd have stopped here. I'm going to give this film a 3.5 out of 5. But what about you? Have you seen this film? And if so, what do you think about it? Comment below, let me know, and until next time, crack in.